It's been a once-in-a-lifetime election. So many fortunes have risen, so many fortunes have fallen. Let's unpack all that's happened on day 2 at the Results Centre and try to make sense of where our country stands after this momentous and seismic election. Aye. Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX. If you're new around here, my name is Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh, and on this channel, we explore South African politics through interviews and analysis. Thank you so much for helping us get to 100,000 subscribers. Okay, yesterday we did a video where we looked at the initial results and what things were looking like, and what I'd like to do today is look at the final projections, which I think are becoming really accurate at this moment, so you can place great stock in where the projections are, and think about what that means, firstly just politically, before we get onto coalitions and all of that, which we will do. Just what has happened here, because I don't think as a country we have fully digested the magnitude of this political moment. And once we've looked at the national picture, I want to also look at the provincial picture, because if anything, I think the provincial picture is more breathtaking in some ways than the national picture. Then once we've looked at the results, what I'll do is take a look at the next big chat as a country that we need to have, and that is, who will our next government be? What are the potential coalition dynamics? And what are some of the narratives that are emerging right now about who will be governing the country, who will be president of the country, who will be the premiers, etc. So let's begin with the results. Now, we have just had a game-changing election. For those of you whose first election this is, it's not always like this. I've never seen an election like this in my life. And I don't know if we're going to see another one like it anytime soon. Let's just take a step back. It looks like the ANC is being projected somewhere around the 40% mark. That, fellow SMWX family, is quite frankly monumental. Many people predicted they would fall below 50. I was one of them. I said 44. People were laughing me out of the room the day before the election. They were like, no ways. But 40, that's even worse than my prediction. And I think we've all been talking about the present moment and what it means for politics and what will happen tomorrow, but this is a historic moment, and I think we need to really see it in terms of historical time. This moment, I think, when we look back in 5 years and 10 years and 30 years, will be a crucial, at least political, turning point in South African history. And I think South African politics, maybe even in our lifetimes, will in some ways be before 2024 and after 2024. I think an entire era in which people have had assumptions about the ANC and its dominance in our politics has come to an end. An entire political generation is at its end. And our country stands at the precipice of a whole new generation. That's what 40% means. It also means that South Africa has strongly, and we can get to other parties, and I will get to other parties, but I really think it's important that we don't deflect from the governing party, the party that has run South Africa for 30 years, and what has happened to the ANC in this election. I joked on social media that the ANC is officially experiencing stage 6 vote shedding. But seriously, it's dramatic, and it's a strong statement that South Africans have made, that you can push us far, but no further. And there is no automatic right to power, and there is no automatic right to a majority. I think the statement that has been sent, I've seen a lot of fear and anxiety and what happens from here. I think there's a moment of hope that we're missing, a moment of accountability, a moment of reckoning. And any government that holds power after this will know that this can happen to you too. And that is a profound, profound moment, because no other government has yet known that in South African history. I think accountability will be reshaped after this moment, and the ANC will no longer on its own be able to dictate what happens. So 40% nationally, I just think is shocking. It's awe-inspiring. It's just unlike anything I've seen politically before in this country. So much for the ANC nationally, and I'll come to the provincial picture too. Let's talk about the DA, because it's also worth reflecting on where the DA stands right now. This is an interesting election because elections are always about what happens, but also about the expectations of what is going to happen. And I think it's very clear that the DA ran a base election. They knew who their voters were, they knew what their fears were and what their hopes were, and they targeted them surgically. And they turned out, and that 20 to 22% of DA voters, and it's been there for now 3 election cycles, came out. Now, there was great public expectation that the DA was going to fall to the teens, and I certainly didn't make that prediction. I had them at 20. But people who don't vote for the DA, I think maybe to some extent got carried away in the narrative that the DA's opponents were spinning, that, you know, this DA is decaying and declining. And like it or not, their message resonated with their base. Now, I think to some extent the DA has also benefited from those low expectations from the wider electorate. And so this result suddenly looks quite good for them because people were expecting a slide. But in the cold light of day, this is largely electoral stagnation, at least nationally. Although I do think the Western Cape and holding on to that is a triumph for the DA, and it's a victory for the DA. And any political analyst worth their salt has to admit that. So it's interesting because I would have thought before this election that if the DA was at 21 or so, that would be bad news for John Steenhuisen. But the way that people were expecting the DA to land, it now looks that he's outperformed expectations, even if he hasn't outperformed previous DA performance. So we wait and see, but I don't get the sense that he comes out a much weaker figure after this election than, say, a Cyril Ramaphosa. So I think the DA neither has reason to celebrate too loudly, nor to commiserate too forcefully either. And of course, they occupy a central place in South African politics still. They're a serious political machine still, and they will have to be reckoned with now, and will, in one scenario when we get to coalitions, possibly be a serious part of the South African government in one scenario. So that's how I see things for the DA. We can only talk about MK next because they are the 3rd biggest party, and that alone tells you something about this election. You know, for me, the MK, after the ANC's decline, is the next biggest story. To go around 13-14% in your first election, whether you have former President Jacob Zuma or not, is a massive feat. And I'm a little concerned, once again, that those outside of the MK voter base are really flattening their analysis when they come to the MK. Now, is the MK a party where people have said crazy and outlandish and even dangerous things, wearing MK regalia? Yes, we have seen that. But I don't think it's enough to just say, oh, the MK is this authoritarian force, it's this force of ethnic mobilization, quote-unquote tribalism, which we only use for MK. We don't use for any other, racial group or even any other cultural group in South Africa. Yes, there is a factional ANC dynamic. Yes, there is a dynamic of identity solidarity. Yes, there is a conservative strand. Yes, there is a militaristic strand to MK. We can concede all those things, but we still need to treat MK with the same complexity that we treat the ANC, the same complexity that we treat the DA. And we need to really ask about what happened in this political moment. It's not as simple as Jacob Zuma woke up one day and decided to start a party and everyone followed him. What was the message of the MK in this election? Yes, their manifesto may have been, shall we say, vague at times, but there was an underlying message. There was even an underlying economic message. There was an underlying social message. And the politics of the MK combined lots of different kinds of politics that have sometimes been traditionally on the right of the South African political spectrum, especially socially, some of which have been on the left of the political spectrum, questions of land, and they combine that into a unique electoral offering that those of us who are scholars and analysts need to take seriously, because the easy narratives I'm getting a bit tired of, and I'm looking for some depth in coverage of the MK. It's only right that a party that has got so many votes is treated with the same analytical dexterity as other parties. So it is just quite stupendous what the MK has done in this election. It is the best first election by far by any party. And I think we have already covered just how big this moment is. And when we get into some of the provincial dynamics, we'll also see that. Then we've got the EFF. Now, I also want to go against some of the conventional wisdom here. Is this a disappointing result for the EFF? Yes, particularly when you weigh this result against expectations. Before the MK, the EFF was polling at 17, sometimes even 18%. So I think this might well have been a breakout election for the EFF, were it not for the MK. But it turns out that a lot of their growth was likely to come from KZN. And MK, of course, ate into that as they ate into virtually everyone's growth. Now, as it stands, it looks like the EFF is going to finish at around 9.6%, I think it is. Is that disappointing, like I say? Yes, I think it's disappointing. Is that below expectations for the EFF? Yes, I think it's below expectations. But this idea that it's a catastrophe for the EFF, that it's a disaster, that we can write the EFF off is distinctly premature. I would hold your horses on that. The EFF has fallen about 1.4%. They were at 10.8. So maybe 9.4, 9.6, somewhere around there. Let's call it an average of 1.5. We'll see where things shake out. That's not a disastrous decline. It is a decline, but it's not catastrophic. I think the EFF has roughly stayed where it was, a little bit down. But at about 38 seats in parliament, it will still be a political force. A similar political force to where it was before. Now, they have taken some big hits in places like KZN and in different provinces, and the provincial picture will also probably concern them rather than overjoy them. But I would also just hold off on the predictions of EFF demise just yet. I think that they will reconsolidate and that they will still be a factor in South African politics for sure going forward. So that's how I would analyze the results nationally for the big parties. But let's come to some of these provincial dynamics. And here I actually want to look at the specific numbers. Gauteng, GP, ANC 34%. 34%. You know, I'll never forget 2019. The ANC got a warning shot in that election. They got 50.4 in Gauteng. The electorate said, one last chance. We'll give you a slim majority, but please do something with it. And the ANC didn't heed that warning, nationally and provincially, and now look. DA at 27%, I think they'll be happy with that. EFF at 13%, and MK at 10% in Gauteng. Once again, we must look at that, because we were told that MK would only perform in KZN. And then, of course, people are going to say, yes, well, it's only Zulu-speaking voters in Gauteng. No, I don't think so. Sure, that may be a big chunk of MK votes, but what was the MK doing in the suburbs? What was the MK doing in the black middle class that attracted some votes there? So, yeah, I think that's quite sensational. And Action SA down in 4.1%, a disappointing election, I think, for them. It's fair to say. So Gauteng is massive because Gauteng's gone and the ANC is very far down, and the coalition dynamics are looking very interesting. ANC DA would get over the line. ANC EFF would not get over the line. ANC EFF MK would get over the line. So once again, we have a similar picture in Gauteng as we do nationally. It's either ANC DA or it's ANC EFF MK. Or DA maybe might try to also get some of the other parties and create a coalition in and of itself. So let's have a look at what Salim Simanga's plans are going forward. I want to take a look at the Western Cape. This is a solid hold for the DA. There were predictions of decline and doom, and they've held on at nearly 55%. And I think that shows that they have strong support in the Western Cape. They know who their voters are. They turn them out. And one can only say the DA had a good election in the Western Cape. ANC at 20 just shows over the long historical span their decline. At one point, the ANC would command a majority in the Western Cape. And I must also talk about the Patriotic Alliance as well. They had an excellent election. There's no doubt about that. And in the Western Cape, we have them here at 8%, third biggest party. But also nationally, to get 2%. Listen, guys, elections are not pap and vlees, as politicians have been known to say. And the Patriotic Alliance is now a force in South African politics. In Parliament, I think they're going to have something like 10 seats. We can debate their policy platform and we can debate what their politics represents, which we will do, but the Patriotic Alliance didn't come to play in this election, that's for sure. KZN, Bazalwan, 44 for MK, 44 for MK party in KZN. The biggest party, and not just the biggest party by far. ANC 18%. 18%, no, I can't believe what I'm seeing. 18, the ANC. And then IFP 17, so the ANC and IFP are neck and neck there. Now the interesting thing in KZN is it seems that, if I'm not mistaken, ANC, DA, IFP could just about make 50%. However, of course, MK plus ANC obviously gets over the line. MK plus any other party gets over the line, except MK EFF does not get over the line in KZN because the EFF took a walloping in KZN and are at 2.2% there. So fascinating again. Stalemate stuff. Free State, I told you it would be close. ANC 52, DA 21 there. Mpumalanga, can we just talk about Mpumalanga quickly? It's on a knife's edge. It's looking like the ANC might just hang on to the slimmest hair's breadth majority there. But for the ANC to be hanging on in Mpumalanga is just mind-boggling for me. And so let's take a step back and look at the provincial picture here, right? The ANC was governing and had a majority in 8 of 9 provinces 2 days ago. Right. Where does it stand now? Gauteng, gone. KZN, gone. Northern Cape, by the way, which I called. Watch Northern Cape, and I said, I think that's the one. Gone, by the way. So no majority in 3 provinces, but it gets deeper. Because in the other provinces where it used to have healthy majorities, it now has slim majorities. Slim majority in Mpumalanga, slim majority in Free State. And so suddenly, the ANC is in a position now where it actually only has a comfortable majority, get this, in 3 out of 9 provinces. Everywhere else is either a slim majority or no majority at all. And those 3 provinces are Northwest, where it did really well, and that defied my expectations because I thought they were in danger there too. Limpopo and the Eastern Cape. Everywhere else, the ANC is either a slim majority or not the majority. That, for me, is almost a bigger story than falling to 40 nationally. Right, having looked at some of those dynamics then, let's just talk about the government, because I think the conversation now shifts from what are the results, we know what the results are, to what is the government that we're going to get. And just to break it down, the Constitution stipulates that when the results are formally announced, so not like now, but when you get that official announcement from the IEC, there are 14 days for South Africa to elect a Speaker of Parliament and a President, and that will happen at the first sitting of the National Assembly, so in about 2 weeks from now. Youth Day, June 16th, there's a long weekend there. Around about that time, before that time, we need to have a president in this country, and there's going to be a massive sitting. And guess what? MPs elect via secret ballot. But we're going to do a whole set of episodes on that. So I'm just giving you a preview there. But what do we have in front of us? We have the ANC facing what I think are really two options. It's crystallized into two options. It's a dilemma. Yesterday I said a trilemma, but interestingly, I think the ANC and EFF, although they might just make it to a very slim majority, it's always dicey to only have like 201 seats. You really want 210 out of 400 seats in Parliament so that you have some comfort and margin, because you don't want an MP to fall sick one day and then you've lost your majority. So I think the ANC, if it is to govern, must either convince the DA into a coalition, or it must convince the MK. And another variant of that choice is the MK and the EFF. If they want a bigger majority, something close to two-thirds, then they go MK EFF. If they want a big majority as well, they can go with DA. And if the ANC is able to get either of those partnerships over the line, they have a comfortable governing majority and they don't really need to worry about the survival of the government if they can keep that coalition partner on side. The question, though, is those are two diametrically opposite political decisions, economic decisions, maybe even social decisions. So if the ANC goes with the DA, which a lot of people on this rock are touting as the sane option, I would just ask people to think that through from both the ANC and the DA perspectives. It looks easy. Oh yeah, ANC, DA, yes, they'll meet somewhere in the center. Who trades what? And what are the political and social consequences of that? Does John Steenhuisen become deputy president? And how does South Africa react to that? The DA, you see, we're in a different political world. The DA can demand as much as a third of cabinet. Did you hear that? They can demand as much as a third of cabinet. Yeah, it's not about one little position here and one little position there. It could be a third of cabinet. So we really need to think through how deep this could be. Similarly, MK, and even if it's MK EFF, we're talking about big leverage that these parties would have over the ANC. So the days of the ANC being able to just offer crumbs are over. They're going to have to really make concessions, and those concessions, whether it's EFF, MK, whether it's the DA, are going to have massive political ramifications and consequences. So look, the channel, I think, is slowly going to move to that conversation. So I don't want to go too much into it now, because I just want to give you my first thoughts and takes here at The Rock. But let's have that chat as a nation now. Where do we go from here? What's the ideal situation? The final thing I just want to say on that is, let's drop the level of hysteria either way, right? The electorate has given us tough choices, and we are going to have some massive change in our government, right? And whatever that change may be, it's going to be hard to swallow for some, and it's going to make many others euphoric. But I still think South Africa is very much here to stay. Our institutions are strong and probably will get stronger now. Parliament might come into its own. Accountability might really be a thing in places like Parliament. And so as much as there's anxiety and fear, I think there's also hope. Hope for a new political moment in which no one gets to dictate behind closed doors, and in which decisions must be taken in front of the people in the institutions which the Constitution designs for them to be taken in. So I think we need to ease the hysteria, also ease the euphoria, and realize that the truth is probably going to lie somewhere in between. And we, as the people who have just created this election outcome, also should have a say and should put pressure on the next government, whoever it is, that above all should know that if they so much as step over the line, they will be held accountable by South Africans who deserve so much more than they've got over the last 5 years, so much more than they've got over the last 10 years, so much more than they've got over the last 30 years. And hopefully one day, hopefully it's not in the too distant future, we can look at a country that is prosperous, that is just, and that makes us all proud. spread the fire. Thank you for joining us on these episodes. Thank you for making this channel explode over the last few days. Like, share, subscribe, and make sure that you keep sending those subscriber numbers ticking up. Aye, aye, aye.